Vindler continued his march. His breath froze in front of him. Small crystals of ice formed in an instant, sparkling from the pale light of the last star. He had a duty to the last cadences of the civilizations that had found their way to the small moon of Hearth and its solemn light. There were so few races left. Most of them could not remember the warmth of their own suns. Their ships drifted around the desolate bastion, seeking a final solace in a lone pale star and his service. Vindler would not let their memories be lost to the ever-encroaching dusk. Millennia ago, he would weep for the dying stars, but he had no more tears to shed. It was too cold for tears. The small, mournful crystals of ice were the only memorial he had for the departed. Vindler saw a shape move towards him in the darkness. His ancient face broke into a smile as the cadence approached him. The creature approached him slowly. It was not built for this world and suffered with each step. They were beautiful. Each cadence he encountered was a unique, perfect construct born out of the crucible of their homeworld. Yet, they all moved with the same sad pride of being the last. Few ever reached Hearth with any companionship.
"Come, Cadence, tell me your name."
The creature stopped in front of him. It hissed in welcome, rearing up. Its crimson feathers buzzed. It reached out to the archivist with an armored hand. Vindler took it into his own. Through gaps in its skin, Vindler could just make out a dim flame flickering inside its body. It did not have much time.
"I have come for you, great recorder, on this night of my dying."
The creature spoke to Vindler through its cold touch.
"Tell me your story,"
Vindler said. From his bag, he removed his device. An iron tome from a time he could only faintly remember. The device sung, small sparks of starlight buzzing as its work began.
We were a kind people, generous and expansive, filling every dark cavern of our galaxy, living off the smoke and ash each world could give, and in turn we gave life. This was no noble act, though. You see, Archiver, we shared our world with a great destroyer. A swarm born of malice and hate from the depths of our world. Imprisoned by the skies my people called home. We were forged by our gods to serve as its jailer, but we failed our duty. The swarm took to other worlds, devouring all in its wake. We watched, guilt rendering us powerless, our purpose lost to us. We wandered the depths of our world, seeking any remnant of our creators, desperate for any purpose. We breached the most forbidden sanctums and tore apart our holy temples in a vain hope of finding anything to guide us. It took the Avrion years, but we found one of our masters, an iron tomb at the bottom of our oceans. We begged, We pleaded for new purpose. We were denied, so we turned to force. The battle was terrible, but our God relented. His dying breaths he wrote on our souls, inscribing us with new purpose. The smiths of our world forged our instruments of reckoning, monoliths of stone that took us to the dead worlds where we took the ash and smoke and dared to breathe new life into those graves. But as the stars died, the swarm longed for home, to sleep until its next violent harvest. Our final purpose was clear. The cycle would end. Our great monoliths of resurrection let us channel our wrath into a great fire. Our skies burned with the reckoning, our final act in the dusk of our universe. The final Avrion took flight, the last journey to the final star. He was the last of his kind, called to Vindhler by the timeless, immutable summons of the fading skies.
The creature removed its hand. Its breath started to slow.
Your fire is dying, my friend,
Vindhler said, closing his tome.
Thank you, Archiver, for allowing me to share my tale,
the Avrion said. Its fire died, wisps of smoke trailing up into the sky. Vindhler put the tome away in his bag, took the Avrion's hand, bidding farewell. Vindhler continued his eternal stride forward. There were others gathered on the moon, all awaiting him to share their story. He wondered if, as he did at the end of every Cadence's tale, when the Hearth finally died, would new worlds emerge? What, if any, new life would read his tome and remember the stories anew? Vindhler marched towards a small light in the dusk. Regardless of the outcome, he had a duty he had sworn to millennia ago, and he would march forward until the light of Hearth would no longer reveal his path. For now, though, a small beacon of fire on the horizon coaxed him forward. The faint glow on the horizon started to grow as Vindhler approached. He had never seen a campfire like this one. He could hear it sing as he approached. A medley of rage and joy, unlike anything he had ever heard. As he closed in on the valley where it burned its song, he could see a lone figure dance in front of it. Vindhler recognized its shape as humanoid, a work of ancient gods descended from his own people, and a design that had survived the eons with little change. Vindhler sat down, recognizing the significance of the dance in front of the kaleidoscope of embers. Several cycles later, the figure stopped. She turned towards Vindhler and spoke in a voice that was pure harmony.
Archiver, welcome.
She walked over and sat down next to the Archiver. Her fire was small now, but the multicolored cinders still gave off enough light for Vindhler to now finally make out her fine features. Her skin was fair as ash, so much so that her blood shone through, a network of extraordinary colour. She was unclothed, save for small pieces of silver on her fingers and neck.
Welcome to the Hearth, Cadence.
She smiled.
Is this what you call us? I should have figured the archiver would be a poet.
A faint laugh escaped her.
Thank you for not disturbing my dance. It is one of my last works I have to offer.
Vindhler removed his tome.
Tell me your tale.
Our world was an unrivaled Eden. We wanted for nothing. Our great forests and endless oceans provided for us, and we tended to them in turn. We are of a long line of races, from worlds lost to greed, zealousness, and hate. We settled on our final home of not repeating the mistakes of our progenitors. Our home was harmony, and it changed us over the eons. Our fair skin, the brilliance of our blood, but it never tempered the resolve we had inherited to create. We took the name of Brigieed after a lost goddess, and in our new harmony found purpose through song, sculpture, dance, poetry. Every discipline of the old arts became our new driving purpose. Even in the cold shadow of our dead star, our works still remain. Archiver, how I wish I could show you the works of my people. Recite you the poems of Calier that span decades. Sing with you to songs of Sirona that take the very melodies of our home as an instrument, and let have dance with the wondrous moving sculptures of Ephesium. Maybe in another life. It was the purpose of every Brigieed to compose a great work of their chosen discipline. We dedicated our entire lives to the creation, and on the completion of our Vena, we would cast ourselves into harmony's primal garden. There we would pass on, giving our body and mind to our home, closing our part of the cycle so our children could live like we did and compose their own great works. Other races regarded this as a heinous act, but to us it was the greatest honor. But as with all cycles of our universe, it could not exist perpetually. Our twin suns died in a cataclysmic performance, consuming one another. The great winter came and rendered our Eden into a dissonant wasteland. The Brigieed decided to meet this ending with grace. So we convened, all the survivors of the first frost, on the ancestral mountain, where our ancestors had first landed on harmony. There we started the last great work of the Brigieed. The most beautiful change that harmony had bestowed on the Brigieed is our blood. You've seen the prismatic life coursing through my veins, Archiver. It reflects the Brigieed's emotional state, past and present. This protean state of our animus was the greatest pride of my people. Thus, the medium for our last great work was chosen. A monumental tapestry on the inside of the mountain, which cradled us in our early days as harmony shaped us. Every surviving Brigieed gave their very essence of being to the last great painters who sculpted the final, ever-in-flux tapestry. That is all that remains of my people's work. To look on it is to be overcome with what the Brigieed were. It is the very soul of us as individuals and a community. Committed to a canvas of granite. It would take weeks to see all of it and a lifetime to understand. I was not fortunate enough to be part of the final work. A ship from one of our ancestral homes passed by harmony. They told us of the final star. We had but one storyteller left among us, so here I am, Archiver. This tale is my last work.
Vindhler finished penning the final work of the Brigieed before him. He closed his tome. The Brigieed embraced him. Small, flickering tears escaped her eyes as she broke away from him.
Thank you, Archiver. I bid you farewell now. My great work is finished, and I must commit myself to your world now as a thank you.
Vindhler watched as she walked into the motley colored embers. She sent him a final smile and started to sing. The ground around Vindhler and the skies above him roared in a beautiful unity with the Brigieed. Her tapestry of cinders gained new life and consumed her ashen frame. A mournful howl of wind took her ashes into the skies, where it became a frightful aurora, the likes of which Vindhler had never seen on the Hearth's moon. He marched under the blazing lights of the Brigieed's last gift. Under her final song, he could make out the shape of a ship that was burning its way to the ground. Vindhler did not bother quickening his pace. The ship was hurtling towards him, a fierce speed causing its iron to flare. Its design bore a resemblance to many others scattered around the surface of the moon, but where the others had been made for escape, the brutish hulk of this one made clear that it had been made for war. It hit the ground with a groan of thunder. Doors on its side opened. A mechanical brute emerged from the escape pod. Its every motion was accompanied by a cacophony of gears and hydraulics. The mech approached Vindhler, a cannon cradled in its hand. Vindhler locked his gaze on what he assumed to be the construct's eyes.
Transferring controls to pilot.
The behemoth knelt down, its chest open to reveal a smaller form inside. It disconnected the straps that bound it to the cockpit and exited the machine. They bore the same design, another humanoid, but the Brigieed had been of fair build. This one was shorter, muscular. Its clothes clad in what Vindhler took to be memorabilia from several campaigns. This was a soldier. It held out its hand to Vindhler. A strange gesture, but the archiver took it. The soldier shook his hand with a well-practiced vigor. Vindhler responded in kind.
Vindler, I assume.
He nodded. The soldier took a long sigh of relief and began his tale.
We were born into a harsh corner of our galaxy. Terror, our home, was a violent one from the onset, but we survived, becoming the apex of our home. But our dominance was our undoing. We burned our home in the fires of greed and progress. Its original name is long lost to us. We call it Terra now, a clinical term, one devoid of attachment. We set out to the stars, nomads with a thirst to conquer and claim what should never have been owed to us. And we failed, time and again. Outside of our scorched home, we could not find another to inhabit. We tried to bend others' worlds to our will and to our design, but each time our colonization efforts were thwarted. Our scientists looked to the farthest of our known heavens for an answer. We had been calling out into the void with a myriad of messages in every conceivable format, and finally, we got a response. We had found other life. Our great nomadic fleets split, some returning to our barren homeworld, others reaching desperately for new ones promising shelter. One lone ship, 3 million souls, sought the transmission we had received. We were ready to throw ourselves at the knees of whatever we found, be it slavers or be it ruins. Archiver, you must understand, we were a people that thrived on war. Our darkest nature dictated most of our history, bloodshed and conquest with points of pride. It was only at this crucial endpoint of our species that we found any common ground and abandoned our violent instincts. Yet, we could never disregard the promise that we would need our warriors again. We imprisoned them, away from space and time, on a lone ship that would wander the stars eternally. The Terra Sanctus. For its ability to wander the farthest stars, it was Terra Sanctus that sought the lone response. Few of those who set out on the original journeys ever saw it to its end. Generations of us would never put our feet on the soil of a planet we would call our own. The Veil Sector, we called it, in honor of a dead god. We arrived to find a dead system. We made planetfall and found only ruin, the senders of our signal destroyed by a great fleet that itself was soon on our heels. We were its new prey, and so we ran, desperately trying to evade their iron armadas. The Dana found us under the most dire of circumstances. Our great warship, unable to revive its vanguard, had come under fire, and it was sent crashing onto a dead moon. But here, at last, we found those who had responded to our signal. The Dana were unlike any people we could have conceived of, beings of no physical form or mass, beings of pure energy. The Terra Sanctus crash had rendered its power mute. The great engine died, and with it our most formidable machines put to sleep. Lovax, steel giants built in our own image. The Dana offered us a bargain. They would inhabit our war machines, bring life into them so that our vanguard would fight once more. In turn, we would liberate both our peoples from our destroyers, the Razarak. Years passed as we worked in the shelter of the quiet moon to achieve this symbiosis. The Lovax roared to life with the spirits of the Dana and our vanguard as pilots. The Terra Sancta was made whole by the Dana's engineering. They wove life where we forged steel. The Terra Arbor took flight a century after its fall, its twin peoples aboard. Our Lovax took the fight to the Razarak, our vanguard crushing any and all resistance with the power of its symbiotic crews unmatched. We learned to wage war once more. We learned to take comfort in it. We lost count of our battles and our victories, until finally we faced the Razarak homeworld. The Dana hungered for their final blow, but we refused them. The cycles of vengeance had shaped much of Terra's history, too much for us to allow our companions to make the same mistake. The Razarak, however, had other ideas. Through their own means, they detonated their own sun, committing their failure and their entire system to memory and to ruin. The Dana became quiet. A generation passed with their mute presence lingering in the Terra Arbor as we waited for them, imprisoned by their absence. We were staring at the remains of Rezar when the transmission came. The language was our own, and it was calling for help, for aid in a battle they were doomed to lose. The Dana awakened, The Terror Arbor and its warriors rose with new purpose, to serve not as the vanguard of conquerors, but as the defenders of our scattered people. For eons we rode across the Vale, battling those who had come to take the Resurrect's place. The Terror Arbor became a sanctuary. People of innumerable races flocked to us, each adding to their own new home. A wandering ark among the stars. The Vale sector was one of the first to fade. We tried to outrun the Great Dusk for many years. When news of the Hearth and its lone moon reached us, we set out, yet again, as a vanguard force, clearing the way of the dangers that the final night was bound to bring. We cleared the way for them to reach you, Archiver. The Terror Arbor now flies with only a specter on board. It has a final role to play in this tale.
Vindhler looked up. The ship had come into view as the Terran had regaled the Archiver with his story. A monumental vessel, composed out of thousands of smaller ones, each its own distinct design. The thick purple roots of the Dana's engineering bound them together.
An act of recompense from the Dana. The Resurrect will never reach you. Your tome will never be regaled with their history. For that, they are sorry. But the Dana have vowed to buy time for others.
The smaller parts that made up the Terror Arbor were disconnecting from the ship's construct. The roots reached out towards the star, becoming translucent, burning as it came into contact with the fires of Hearth. It was no destructive act, though. As Dana committed to their sacrifice, Vindhler could feel the fire of the star strengthen. Its color changed from a pale white to a powerful violet. Vindhler left the Terran and his Lovak. The two looked on as their home gave its final breath to keep the hearth burning. Vindhler would come across many other residents of the Terror Arbor. Few knew of the reasons behind the Terran and Dana's gallant actions. Among those that did, few cared. The reasons for their salvation were immaterial. The act was all that mattered to them. Vindhler's march soon took him to the cold side of the moon once again. Hearth's intensely slow orbit let its days and nights last what could have been several weeks on other planets. Most of the cadences huddled onto the day side, basking in the last light, but the dark had its share of inhabitants. They were not made for the light, children of the dark, often cruel and violent in nature, predators here on the last hunting ground the universe had to offer. The last time Vindhler had breached the dark side of the moon had ended in violence, a senseless act he did not much care for, but alas, his hand had been forced. The newly invigorated glow of the hearth was soon behind him, but the aurora, the last the Brigieed had painted in the skies of the moon, persisted here. It was not long before Vindhler found a cadence. It was of cruel design, a thick hide bearing a texture of stone, razor-sharp claws adorning each of its 6 limbs. It was looking up at the aurora. Its face was in a state that Vindhler, even with his unfamiliarity of the design, could recognize as awe. It snarled as Vindhler approached. The language was a bastardization of one of his designs, but it wasn't long before he could make out what was being said.
You're the one they call Archiver.
Yes,
Glurum. Alas, Archiver, there is no story to share of my people. We were a young race when our world was destroyed by the rage of a dying star. The few of us that were saved were only done so as a curiosity. A machine sent by its masters to observe the great dying. It stole us from doom, but we Glurum were kept in glass prisons which not even time could pass through. In that purgatory we watched, learning the machine's ways, its traditions, and its life. Other races would visit our jail. Their morbid curiosity of the dead brought them to our prison in droves. Eventually, the kind people of the Terran took pity on us and the other races trapped in those prisons. Where all the other liberated went home to family and tradition, we had no course. The Glurum had no home to return to, no tradition to comfort us, and no world to shelter us. The Terran took us in on their world ships, tried to teach us their ways, but we never felt at ease to make them our own. They gave us a home on their ships. The Terran ships were bright, quiet places. The conditions were painful to us. We could not exist in such complacency. The Terran were kin, desperate to give us a place we could claim as our own. But needs and wants were concepts that had gone extinct to them long ago. Their machines sustained themselves. They had no lust for anything. Their ships dwarfed planets and were paradise. Survival and its primal drive were the only tenets my people had ever known. We needed purpose. We found it through disaster. The Terrans that served as our asylum vessel died. The light went quiet. Its air came to a deafening halt. The Terran could not help themselves in the dark. There, the Glurum found our new conviction. We plumbed into the depths of the vessel, a dark and loud place. Fire and thunder coursing through the veins of metal brought the ship life. We were finally at a place we recognized. The same fury had coursed through our jail for so long. With time and lives, we found ways to coax the machine's rage back to life. Life came back to the Terran's ark. They did not understand our desire to stay there in the core, but they allowed us to make our home there. We, Glurum, finally found our name. We established our dogma and tradition in our subservience to the machine. Our primal, slavish devotion to survival evolved into an eternal resolve to tinker, to learn, improve, and fix. We, Glurum, did not care when the stars started to die. The core of our world ships, the only light we serve. The Terran merely came to this final star out of obligation, a need to see how the great night would finally come to pass. But the desperate calls of salvation reached our ears in the core. The calls of dying machines ferrying the remnants of their masters to this sanctuary. We Glurum have never forgotten the debts we owe. To the Terran, to the machine. The greatest of our craft set out to the cold void. We would answer the call of the stranded. Restore the fury of their vessels, so that they may find their way here. To you, Archiver, we Glurum may lack the great tradition, history, and creeds of those we aided in reaching you, but our legacy will forever be that a legion of the remnants found their way here. And I thank you, Archiver. Not many have the patience for our tale.
Vindhler closed his tome. He knelt before the creature.
I thank you, Glurum. You are serving a great purpose. I have met many races. Few share your nobility.
The Glurum knelt his head. Vindhler bade the Glurum farewell and set off. A part of him wanted to stay and converse, for he saw a rare kinship of duty with him. But in his bones, he could feel that something was wrong on the moon. A disturbance that could only have come from the mountains. The lone mountain lay before Vindhler now. Reality was a fragile thing here. The ones that had settled on the peaks of Hearth were the most powerful of their kind. Gods that had fallen from grace, rendered hollow without worship. He strode up towards the pinnacle. Vindhler detested the archiving of the pantheons. Gods came here believing they could somehow fix the inevitability of the fading light. That the Hearth held some sacred answer that would only be revealed to their holy presence. They would fail. The end could not be negated, only delayed. And even then, sacrifice was the only medium which worked. But surrendering was a concept lost on gods. Vindhler crested the first peak. He continued his march downward. Reality started to spiral around him. Day and night blitzed past him in an instant. The gravity around Vindhler spiraled into forces that would have crushed any being. But Vindhler's ancient frame was immune to these forces. He had endured far worse. He followed the havoc to its source. A small cave ravaged out of the mountain from the violent distortion of nature Vindhler was marching through. Light flickered in the hovel. Vindhler wandered into the cavern. 3 figures, robed in a pure black, sat around a fire, screaming, weeping, and laughing. Their design mimicked Vindhler's own, but it was merely imitation. Godhood had never been a precursor to originality, and many pantheons had strived to change themselves into the visage of Vindhler and his brethren in some misguided attempt at ascension. For the first time in an age, Vindhler removed the horn from his pouch. He breathed deeply and let loose a colossal roar from the instrument. Creation trembled around them, but soon reality was restored to its unviolated state. Gravity calmed, time resumed its restless pace. Vindhler returned his horn to its pouch. Only now did the figures take notice of him.
Archiver.
They spoke to Vindhler's mind directly.
You're upsetting the order of things.
We have no choice.
No, you don't. You're not the first gods to come here and try and reverse what has been done. You won't be the last. And I do not appreciate your adoption of my kin's form.
Vindhler sought out the ancient magics within him, With a wave of a hand, a tempest of coarse light flew through the cave. The black robes and fake skin burned away, leaving the gods bare. Their natural form was small, covered in fur. Large grey eyes widened as Vindhler's magic finished its work. Vindhler looked at the three. They all shared identical features. The similarity enraged him.
"What is this?"
He hissed. He had forgotten the comfort of his anger. The three spoke to him in unison.
"We are one, Archiver. All three forms of my vessel existing in one space. Past, present, future."
"I have seen many self-proclaimed deities come here with misguided faith that they could fix the course of the universe. But you are the first foolish enough to violate time."
"We are different."
Vindhler scoffed. He had heard the justification too many times.
"Of course."
Vindhler could feel his patience running thin. He had little patience for gods as is. The violation of the design he had helped craft did not help. Vindhler removed his tome. He was eager to get done with it.
"Your tale,"
he said, awakening the device.
"No."
Vindhler's rage was simmering now, threatening to engulf him completely.
"What?"
"We failed, Archiver. We failed our subjects, our bequeathed world, our divine purpose."
"This is no excuse."
"It is. We refuse your service. We will die nameless."
Vindhler stared at them, stared until his rage was all that he could find in him.
"You are cowards."
The god's expression did not waver, their neutral stance.
"This universe is built on failure. It is part of the cycle. All this is my kind's failing. We never designed the galaxy with exploration in mind. But here we are, in an ultimate twilight that is part of my failure. All that is left for me to do is my duty. To make sure whatever follows, be it some great new divine or the lowest of mortals, can learn from the failure."
Vindhler took a step forward. The moon rumbled as his anger coalesced into force.
"You are not worth remembering."
He stomped out of the cave, channeling his magic as he did to seal the earth behind him, leaving the failed god to be forgotten. Vindhler marched. He had his heart set on reaching the summit of the lone mountain now. It was there that he and his brethren had agreed to meet at the end. He knew that this time was still far away, but he longed for familiar faces, ones that weren't derivative or pale imitations of his people, but them in their original, flawed, and beautiful state. It was at this summit, in the final few hours of light that Hearth had to offer the universe, that Vindhler would write the final story. Their story. Of how they had come to be. How they had constructed the universe and the laws that governed it. How he and Cronus weaved time to ensure the universe was governed fairly, without mercy. How Wayland had designed the worlds with an unrivaled craftsmanship. How Svarog and his agents designed life to populate the universe, each race tragically unique. How Estrella had forged the stars, each a gift to the races that would live beneath them, and how the failure of their light had destroyed her. And then there was Vindhler's tale, the final one to archive, before the Everdark was upon them. Vindhler could see the summit now. He halted, staring at it with a longing he had tried his utmost not to feel. They might be there, waiting for him, willing for him to perform his final duty, and at long last rest. Vindhler stared across the moon's surface. The aurora performed by the Brigieed was still blaring in the lower heavens. The Darner's ship was all but gone, the last few wisps of the construct slowly descending into the star to prolong the inevitable. Vindhler closed his eyes and breathed a heavy breath. There were others. The cadence of thousands of worlds were still waiting for him, to sing their hymn of the dying. Vindhler made his way down the mountain. Their song would not fall on deaf ears.